They say every story has a reason, but the one I'm about to tell you, it's a warning, a memory that refuses to stay buried, no matter how much I try to forget. I don't care if you believe me or not. All I ask is that you listen, really listen, till the very end, because somewhere in the middle of this story, you'll realize it could have happened to you. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe. Some stories are meant to entertain you, but this one might follow you. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. My friend Ethan had just inherited his late uncle's house, a large, creaky Victorian home on the outskirts of Maine. He invited me to spend the weekend there, claiming it would be fun to help him settle in. I didn't know what unsettled me more, the house's isolation or the way it loomed over a fog-covered hill like something from a forgotten century. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt colder than it should have been. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, but the kind that sinks deeper into your bones. I told myself it was just the wind. It wasn't. Ethan tried to lighten the mood with jokes as we unpacked, but his laughter echoed strangely through the halls, as if the house itself was mocking him. Every footstep seemed to bounce back with a faint delay, like something or someone was walking just behind us. The floorboards groaned even when we stood still. "Don't worry," he said, noticing my unease. My uncle used to say the house breathes when it's cold. I smiled weakly, pretending to believe him. But deep down, I knew what I felt wasn't the wind or the wood. It was a presence. By the time night came, the fog had thickened outside. The house was eerily silent, except for the ticking of an old grandfather clock that stood in the hallway. Ethan went to bed early, leaving me alone in the guest room. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, when I first heard it, a faint whisper, almost like a woman's voice, calling from the hallway. The sound was soft, distant and trembling, as though it came from another room or another time. My heart pounded as I sat up, listening. Then it came again. My name, whispered. I froze. I hadn't told anyone I was staying here, and the only other person in the house was Ethan. I called out his name, but there was no answer, only silence. Then a slow creak of footsteps began to move past my door. I didn't dare move. The steps paused right outside my room, followed by a faint dragging sound, like a hand brushing along the wall. My breathing grew shallow. The air grew colder. I could see my breath. Then nothing, just silence again, thick and heavy, pressing against my ears like the house itself was listening. I barely slept that night. Every sound, the clock ticking, the house settling, felt magnified. When morning finally came, sunlight crept weakly through the dusty curtains, but it didn't bring comfort. At breakfast, I told Ethan what I'd heard. He laughed it off, but I noticed the way his eyes flickered, like he knew something he didn't want to say. "You must have been half asleep," he said, stirring his coffee, but his hands trembled slightly. This house does strange things when it's quiet. I wanted to ask him what that meant, but I let it go. I wish I hadn't. That afternoon, Ethan showed me the attic, where most of his uncle's belongings were stored. The air up there was thick with dust and the faint smell of something old, something decayed. In one corner sat an antique mirror, tall and cracked, draped with a sheet. When I pulled it back, the glass shimmered faintly even though no light was hitting it. I looked at my reflection, and for a split second, I swear I saw someone standing behind me. A woman, pale face, empty eyes. Then she was gone. I spun around, but the attic was empty. Ethan laughed nervously. "Old mirrors play tricks," he said. But I could tell he didn't believe that either. Later that evening, as the fog rolled back in, Ethan confessed something strange. "You're not the first person to stay here," he said quietly. "My uncle used to rent rooms to travelers, but they never stayed long. They said they heard voices at night, sometimes crying." He forced a smile, pretending it was just superstition, but his tone betrayed fear. I asked if anyone had ever died in the house. He didn't answer. He just looked out the window, into the dark fog, and whispered, "I don't like talking about it." That night, I decided to keep a flashlight by my bed. The air felt heavy, the kind that hums just before a thunderstorm. Around 2 a.m., the whispering returned. Faint at first, then clearer. It wasn't one voice this time. It was several, layered and broken, like echoes trapped between walls. I pointed my flashlight toward the door, and the light flickered violently. Then it went out. In the darkness, I heard breathing close. So close it felt like someone was standing right beside me. I reached for my phone, but it slipped from my trembling hand. Then a cold hand touched my shoulder. I screamed and jumped from the bed, shining the flashlight wildly once it flickered back to life. The room was empty, the door slightly ajar. My pulse raced as I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled faintly of lavender and rot. I followed the sound of faint footsteps down the corridor, past the portraits of people whose faces seemed to shift when I looked away. At the end of the hall, the door to Ethan's uncle's study was open. Inside, a candle burned on its own. I hadn't lit it, and Ethan had gone to bed hours ago. I entered the study slowly. The candle flame flickered even though there was no draft. Papers were scattered across the desk, old and yellowed. One of them caught my attention, a handwritten note that read, "Don't sleep in the guest room. She doesn't like it when they do." My blood ran cold. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. The candle went out, and in that suffocating darkness, I heard her voice again, soft, trembling, and heartbreakingly close. "You shouldn't have come." My heart pounded so hard it felt like the sound filled the room. I pressed my hand against the wall, trying to find a door handle in the dark. When my fingers finally touched cold brass, the door flung open on its own. The hallway lights flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. I stumbled out, whispering Ethan's name, but the house swallowed my voice. It was like the walls were absorbing sound, suffocating every echo. Then I heard footsteps again, soft, bare feet padding behind me. I turned around, expected to see Ethan, but the hall was empty. Still, I could feel someone there, standing inches from my back, breathing faintly against my neck. I bolted toward Ethan's room and threw the door open. He was sitting upright in bed, wide awake, pale as the moonlight streaming through the window. "You heard it too," he whispered before I could say anything. I nodded, trembling. He rubbed his face and sighed. "It's her. My uncle told me she never left." His voice cracked when he said it. I asked him who she was, but he just stared past me, toward the dark hallway, like he expected her to walk in at any moment. "She died here," he finally said, "and I think she's angry." Ethan told me the story in fragments, his voice shaking. Years ago, before the house belonged to his uncle, it was owned by a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker. According to the locals, Mrs. Whitaker suffered from insomnia and paranoia. One winter night, she disappeared. Her husband claimed she went visiting family out of state, but neighbors reported hearing her screams at night before she vanished. When police finally investigated, they found her wedding ring buried beneath the floorboards of the guest room, the same room I'd slept in. They never found her body, Ethan whispered, but people say she still roams the halls, looking for a ring or for him. After hearing that, sleep was impossible. We stayed up until dawn, the house eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of the stairs. At sunrise, Ethan suggested we leave for the day, to get some air. But when we stepped outside, the fog hadn't lifted. It was thicker, heavier, as if it didn't want us to go. The trees that surrounded the property stood unnaturally still, and no bird sang. I'd never realized how oppressive silence could feel. Ethan turned back toward the house and frowned. "It's like it's watching us," he muttered. I didn't answer, but I felt it too. We drove into town, but the fog followed us for miles. At a small diner, Ethan spoke to an old waitress who immediately recognized the address when he mentioned it. Her expression darkened. "You shouldn't be staying there," she said, lowering her voice. "That place was cursed the day they built it. People hear her crying at night. Some say she's waiting for someone to find what he hid." Ethan asked what she meant, but the woman refused to say more. She only handed him a napkin with something scribbled on it. "The cellar. Don't go alone." When we returned to the house that evening, the fog had thickened so much we could barely see the driveway. The air smelled damp, metallic. Ethan and I went straight to the cellar door in the kitchen. It was locked with a heavy iron latch, old and rusted. Ethan said he'd never been down there. His uncle had kept it sealed. "If there's something down there, I don't want to see it," he murmured. I hesitated, but curiosity gnawed at me against his protests. I found a screwdriver and pried the latch loose. As the door creaked open, a wave of cold air poured out, smelling of earth and mildew and something else. Something sweet and rotting. The wooden stairs groaned beneath our weight as we descended. My flashlight beam danced across the damp stone walls, revealing cobwebs and old shelves lined with jars I couldn't recognize. Some were filled with cloudy liquid and what looked like hair. The deeper we went, the colder it became. Near the far wall, we found a trunk covered in dust. Ethan hesitated, but I knelt and unlatched it. Inside were old clothes, a cracked porcelain doll, and a diary bound in red leather. The first page was dated in 1912. The handwriting was neat but faded. He promised me I'd never be alone again. My stomach turned. Something about the words felt alive. We brought the diary upstairs and began reading by candlelight. Most of the entries were unsettling. Mrs. Whitaker writing about her husband locking her in the guest room to keep her calm. The last entry chilled me to the core. He said if I scream again, he'll bury me where no one will find me, but I will find a way to make him hear me even after death. Ethan slammed the book shut. "We should burn it," he said, his voice trembling. But before we could move, the candle flickered violently and went out. Then we heard it. The faint sound of humming coming from the cellar below. It was a woman's voice, soft, distant, and filled with sorrow. The melody was slow, almost like a lullaby. Ethan gripped my arm tightly. "That's the song my uncle used to hum in his sleep," he whispered. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it toward the cellar door. The humming stopped. Silence filled the air again, heavier than before. Then, from the other side of the door, we heard a single knock. Just one, firm and deliberate. Ethan backed away, shaking his head. "She knows," he whispered. "She knows we read it." We didn't speak for the rest of the night. Every time the house creaked, I flinched. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of whispering again. Only this time it was coming from inside the room. I turned on the flashlight and froze. The diary we'd left on the table was open, its pages flipping on their own as if being turned by invisible hands. It stopped on the last entry, but new words were appearing. Fresh ink writing itself across the paper. "I found you." The air turned icy, and I heard the faint hum of that same lullaby behind me. When I turned around, the room was empty, but the floorboard behind me creaked. I stood frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The floor creaked again, closer this time. I forced myself to turn around, expecting to see Ethan, but there was no one. The air felt thick, like breathing through water. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A faint shadow gliding along the wall, moving against the direction of my light. It passed over the diary and stopped near the mirror in the corner. The glass fogged up slowly, forming letters as if someone was writing from the other side. 3 words appeared in the condensation. "He buried me." My hand went numb. The mirror cracked with a sharp, deafening snap. The noise jolted Ethan awake. He stumbled into the room, eyes wide with panic. When I pointed at the mirror, the words were already gone, the cracks glinting faintly under the light. "We have to leave," I said. "Now." But as we rushed toward the front door, it refused to open. The lock turned, but the door wouldn't budge. Even the windows felt fused shut. The whole house groaned, like it was alive, like it was reacting to our fear. The lights flickered, then went out completely. For a few seconds, all we could hear was our own breathing. Then the faint sound of footsteps, bare feet coming down the stairs. We backed into the living room, clutching our flashlights like weapons. The sound grew louder, slow, deliberate steps descending the staircase. When the beam finally caught the stairs, my blood ran cold. A figure stood halfway down, pale, almost translucent, wearing what looked like a torn nightgown. Her head hung low, hair cascading over her face. I couldn't see her eyes, but I could feel her stare piercing through me. Ethan whispered her name, Clara. The moment he said it, Her head jerked up violently, revealing hollow, blackened eyes that didn't reflect light. The air around us dropped instantly, and the candles on the mantel ignited by themselves. The flames burned blue. The figure started descending the stairs, her bare feet barely touching the wood. Ethan grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the kitchen. We slammed the cellar door shut behind us, panting. The humming started again, closer this time, like it was coming from right under the floorboards. I glanced at Ethan. He was shaking uncontrollably, muttering, "She followed me here." I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked at me with hollow eyes. "The night my uncle died, I saw her too. She touched him before he stopped breathing." My stomach twisted. "You think she killed him?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The humming grew louder, vibrating to the floor like a pulse. I could feel it in my chest, rhythmic and deep. The cellar door rattled violently, as if something below was trying to break through. I grabbed a chair and jammed it under the handle. "It's not going to hold." Ethan shouted. Then silence, sudden and absolute. We stood there, frozen. A faint whisper slid through the crack under the door. "Let me out." It sounded desperate, pleading against all logic. Part of me wanted to open it, to see her, to understand. But Ethan pulled me back. "That's not her voice," he said. "It's the house." Minutes felt like hours. We sat in the dark, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Finally, Ethan stood up, determination replacing fear. "If this is where she's buried, we have to find her," he said. I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew he was right. Whatever haunted this house wasn't going to stop until we uncovered the truth. We grabbed shovels from the shed and returned to the cellar. The air was colder than ever, thick with the scent of damp earth. We started digging near the far wall, where the humming had been loudest. Each strike of the shovel echoed like a heartbeat through the stone chamber. Hours passed. My arms ached, and sweat dripped down my face despite the cold. Then, Ethan's shovel hit something solid. He froze. I knelt beside him and brushed away the dirt with trembling hands. What we uncovered wasn't a coffin. It was a wooden chest, sealed shut with rusted nails. Ethan pried it open with a shovel. Inside was a skeleton, curled in on itself, still wearing the remnants of a white nightgown. Around its bony finger glimmered a golden ring, the same one we'd seen mentioned in the diary. I felt my stomach lurch. Ethan whispered, "Clara." And in that moment, every candle in the house went out. We scrambled upstairs, gasping for air, but the house was in complete darkness. The air vibrated with a low, guttural sound, half growl, half sob. The walls began to tremble, dust falling from the ceiling. Then, one by one, the portraits on the walls burst into flames. Faces twisted, eyes melting into black voids. The humming returned, but now it was angry, distorted, echoing from every corner. I screamed Ethan's name, but my voice was drowned out by a thunderous crash. The cellar door had blown open, and a wave of cold air surged up, carrying the faint scent of roses and decay. The figure stood there, framed by the darkness. Her face was clearer now. Sunken cheeks, lifeless eyes, lips that moved without sound. She raised one trembling hand, pointing directly at Ethan. "He's not who you think," she whispered. I turned to him, confused. He stepped back, eyes wide with guilt. "I didn't mean to," he stammered. "It was an accident." The spirit's expression twisted into rage, and every light in the house exploded. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his head. "She wouldn't stop screaming," he cried. "I just wanted her to be quiet." My heart stopped. "You killed her?" I whispered. He didn't answer, but the spirit did. He buried me alive. The air turned violent. Objects flew across the room. Windows shattered, and the floorboards cracked open beneath us. Ethan screamed, crawling backward as the figure advanced. "I'm sorry," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. The spirit stopped just inches from him, tilting her head in that unnatural, broken way. Then she smiled, a cold, empty smile, and reached out to touch his face. The moment her hand met his skin, his body went limp, His eyes rolled back and he collapsed. I tried to run, but the door slammed shut. The last thing I saw before everything went black was her reflection in the shattered glass, smiling at me. When I came to, the room was silent. The air smelled faintly of burnt wood and something metallic. Blood, maybe. Ethan was gone. His flashlight lay beside me, cracked and flickering. The house was different now. The walls seemed darker, the air heavier. Every sound was distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I stumbled toward the hallway, calling out for Ethan, but only my echo answered. The portraits that had once hung on the walls were blank now, empty canvases with faint handprints smeared across them. It was as if the house had erased its own memories. Then, faintly from upstairs, I heard it again, the lullaby, but this time it was being hummed in my voice. I froze at the base of the stairs, listening. The sound was soft, rhythmic, almost gentle. My throat tightened. I hadn't made a sound, yet the humming continued perfectly in tune with my own heartbeat. Slowly, I climbed the steps, each one groaning under my weight. At the top, the corridor stretched longer than before, as if the house had expanded in the dark. Doors lined both sides, none of which I recognized. I picked one and pushed it open. Inside was my guest room, but everything was reversed, like a mirror image. My clothes lay neatly folded on the bed. The diary sat on a nightstand, open to a new page that I hadn't written. It said, "Welcome home." Panic surged through me. I grabbed the diary and flipped through it. Every page was now filled with handwriting identical to mine, entries describing things I hadn't done, nights I hadn't lived. "She's rewriting you." I heard Ethan's voice whisper behind me. I turned around, but he wasn't there. His voice came again, distant, hollow. "She needs a body to stay." My hands began to tremble. The room's reflection shimmered like water, and for a moment, I saw her standing where my reflection should have been. Clara, smiling softly, her eyes glinting with something that wasn't hate but longing. Then she reached toward the glass, and the mirror rippled like liquid. I stumbled backward as her hand broke through the surface, dripping with black, viscous fluid. She stepped out of the reflection entirely, her movements fluid but wrong, like she was mimicking how humans walk, her head tilted, studying me with curiosity. "He tried to bury me," she whispered, her voice echoing twice, once from her mouth and again from the walls. "But now, I'm free." I tried to run, but the door slammed shut and melted into the wall. My flashlight flickered violently, then died. In the darkness, her voice grew closer. "You took my room," she hissed. "Now you'll take my place." I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. The air pulsed with her presence, thick and electric. Then, a faint glow emerged from floorboards, a soft, golden light outlining a hidden trapdoor. Desperate, I pried it open and climbed down into what looked like a narrow crawl space. The air was suffocating, filled with dust and the faint scent of lavender. My flashlight flickered back to life, revealing writing on the wooden beams. Words scratched into the wood with something sharp. "Forgive me. Don't let her out. The house listens." My hands shook as I crawled forward. Then I saw a figure lying ahead, motionless, dressed in Ethan's clothes. I crawled closer, whispering his name. His body was twisted awkwardly, one arm pinned under him. When I turned him over, my stomach lurched. His eyes were open, but empty. His mouth hung slightly ajar, as if frozen mid-scream. Carved into his chest were 3 words, "She is me." I stumbled backward, hitting my head against the beam. My vision blurred, and the flashlight rolled away, casting wild shadows. Somewhere above me, I heard the floorboards creak, the sound of someone pacing directly overhead. Then, faintly, Clara's voice, now soft and almost tender. "Don't be afraid. I only need one of you." I scrambled out of crawl space, gasping for air as I emerged into the living room. Everything was quiet again. The windows were open now, and the fog outside glowed faintly under the moonlight. I wanted to believe it was over, but the silence felt wrong, like the pause between breaths. I grabbed my car keys from the counter and bolted for the front door. This time it opened easily. I ran outside, not looking back, until I reached the end of the driveway. The house loomed behind me, silent and still. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing in the window, Ethan waving, but his eyes were completely black. I drove aimlessly through the fog, trying to calm my shaking hands. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked wrong. My eyes seemed darker, my skin pale and waxy. Every time I blinked, the image flickered, showing brief flashes of Clara's face instead of mine. I stopped the car by the roadside, heart pounding, and splashed cold water from a bottle onto my face. When I looked back into the mirror, it was just me again. Or at least, it looked like me. But then I noticed my lips moving on their own, whispering words I couldn't hear. I covered my mouth. The whispering didn't stop. By dawn, I had driven nearly 100 miles away. I checked into a small motel, desperate for rest. The room was plain, white sheets, buzzing fluorescent light, nothing like that curse house. I lay down, telling myself it was over, but as I began to drift off, I heard the faint hum of a lullaby again. My eyes flew open. The sound was coming from the bathroom. I approached slowly, every step heavier than the last. The light inside flickered. When I pushed the door open, the mirror above the sink was fog, and across it, written in long, wet streaks, were two chilling words. You stayed. I stumbled backward, heart racing, but the door behind me slammed shut. The lights went out, plunging me into darkness. The humming grew louder, circling me. You let me in, her voice whispered from every direction. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, but it felt searing hot. Suddenly, I saw a movement in the mirror's reflection, a shadow standing behind me. Clara's pale face appeared beside mine, smiling faintly. It's your turn now, she said. I screamed and smashed the mirror with my fist. Glass shattered everywhere, cutting deep into my skin. But when I looked down, the blood wasn't red. It was black. I stumbled out of the bathroom, clutching my bleeding hand. The room seemed to warp around me, walls bending, shadows stretching longer than they should. The air buzzed faintly, like static from an old television. I turned toward the bed, and my heart nearly stopped. The diary was there, the same one from the house, resting perfectly centered on the sheets. My keys and bag were gone. The motel door was locked from the inside. I stood frozen, too afraid to move. Then the diary opened on its own, pages fluttering wildly before stopping on a blank one. Ink began to appear letter by letter. You can't leave what's already inside you. The words bled into the page, smearing as if they were alive. I backed away slowly, feeling lightheaded. My reflection in the TV screen caught my eye. It was smiling, though I wasn't. I turned the TV off, but the reflection stayed. Its lips moved soundlessly at first, then the voice filled the room. She's part of you now. My breath hitched. The lights flickered once, twice, then went completely dark. In the silence, I could hear the faint dragging of bare feet across the carpet. The same sound I'd heard that first night in the guest room, except now it was inside my mind. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam illuminated the wall, revealing words scrawled in red. They weren't there before. Find where she was hidden. My pulse raced. I didn't understand. Hadn't we already found her in the cellar? I flipped open the diary again, desperate for answers, but the handwriting was changing, slanting violently across the pages. Not her body, it said. Her soul. I felt dizzy, like gravity had shifted. The air grew cold, frosting the edges of the mirror. Then, faintly, I heard whispering coming from a vent. A woman's voice, soft, pleading. Help me? Without thinking, I knelt by the vent and pressed my ear to it. The voice was clearer now. He trapped me in the walls, it said. Find the other door. My flashlight flickered. I looked around, scanning the motel room, and that's when I noticed something strange. A faint outline on the far wall, like a rectangular frame hidden under the wallpaper. My hand shook as I tore the paper away, revealing a small wooden door about the size of a cupboard. It wasn't supposed to be there. I hesitated for a moment, then pulled it open. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of soil and roses. A whisper followed. You've come back. The space behind the door wasn't a wall. It was a tunnel, dirt-lined, narrow, and impossibly deep. It shouldn't have existed. I crawled inside, my flashlight trembling. The deeper I went, the more the earth pulsed beneath my palms, like I was crawling through a living thing. Whispers echoed around me, dozens of voices overlapping, crying, praying, begging. I wanted to turn back, but something pulled me forward. The tunnel opened into a small chamber lit by a single candle. In the center was a wooden cradle. Inside lay a small bundle wrapped in white cloth. My heart pounded as I reached for it. When I unwrapped the cloth, I found a porcelain doll, its eyes black, its mouth sewn shut with red thread. It looked identical to the one we'd found in the cellar trunk, but now it was pristine, untouched by time. I picked it up and a wave of nausea hit me. The whispers stopped. The air grew completely still. Then from behind me, a voice whispered softly in my ear, "You freed me." I turned around, but there was no one there. Only the candle flame, which now burned black. The tunnel walls began to shake, dust raining down. I clutched the doll and crawled as fast as I could toward the light. When I emerged back into the motel room, everything was wrong. The bed, the lamp, the wallpaper. None of it matched what had been there before. The room was now identical to the guest room in Ethan's uncle's house. The same cracked ceiling, the same wooden floor. My breath came in short gasps. I looked at the window, but outside was only darkness, endless and deep. I shouted for help, but my voice came back distorted, like someone else was mimicking me. The doll in my hands twitched, its sewn mouth vibrating as if trying to speak. Then, faintly, it whispered, "Mother." The sound sent chills racing down my spine. I dropped the doll, and it hit the floor with a soft thud, but the moment it did, the lights in the room dimmed to a dull red glow. The air thickened, pressing down on my chest. I could feel her presence again, stronger than ever. Clara's voice filled the room, no longer distant but right beside me. "He buried me, but I carried him too," she said. "Now we are one." I turned slowly. Ethan stood in the corner, pale and trembling, his eyes hollow. "She's not done," he said. "You brought her with you." I backed away, shaking my head. "You're dead," I whispered, but Ethan smiled weakly. "Maybe, or maybe you just never left." His voice was layered, like two people speaking at once. He took a step closer, and the walls seemed to close in, pulsing with every heartbeat. I pressed my hands in my ears, screaming for it to stop, but the voices grew louder, merging into one endless chorus. "Stay." The doll rolled across the floor toward me, stopping at my feet. Its eyes blinked open for the first time, and through the sewn threads, a faint whisper escaped. "It's your turn." I ran for the door, but it dissolved into the wall before I reached it. The room shuddered violently, and the air filled with the scent of roses and decay. My vision blurred as shadows crawled up the walls like vines. Then, the diary burst open on the bed, its pages flipping furiously. Every line now bore my name, written over and over until the letters bled together. I screamed, clutching my head. "What do you want from me?" I cried. The room fell silent. Then, softly from the darkness behind me, her voice answered, "I want my life back, and you're going to give it to me." I stumbled backward, searching for an exit that didn't exist. The air felt heavier, as if the room itself was breathing. The walls pulsed softly, expanding and contracting like lungs. My reflection in the mirror began to move again, only this time it didn't mimic me. It watched me. Its smile widened, slow and deliberate. "You can't keep pretending," it whispered. "You let her in." I shook my head violently. "No, I didn't." I screamed, slamming my fist against the glass. It didn't crack. The reflection blinked, tilted its head, and for the first time, I saw Clara's eyes staring back at me, empty, yet somehow aware. I felt a sharp pain behind my eyes, like something was crawling inside my skull. My knees buckled, and I fell to the floor, gasping. Flashes of memories that weren't mine flooded my mind. Victorian furniture, candlelight, a crying baby, a woman screaming in the cellar. It was her life, bleeding into mine. My body convulsed as I tried to resist, but her voice filled my head, calm and certain. "You came to me willingly. You opened the door." I clawed at my temples, trying to block her out. "Get out of my head." I yelled. The only response was laughter, soft, echoing, endless. When I finally opened my eyes, I wasn't in the motel anymore. I was standing in a long hallway lined with old portraits, faces that looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place them. The wallpaper was peeling, the air thick with dust. I reached out and touched one of the frames. The moment my fingers brushed it, the painted eyes rolled to meet mine. "You shouldn't have come back," the portrait whispered. I stumbled backward, heart racing. The floorboards creaked, and from behind me came the sound of a lullaby, off-key and slow, sung by a voice that seemed both human and not. I turned toward the sound. Down the hallway, a figure stood, a woman in a faded nightgown, her hair long and tangled, her face half hidden in shadow. She held the same porcelain doll, cradling it gently. The lullaby stopped when she lifted her gaze to me. "You took her," she said softly. "You took my daughter." I shook my head, terrified. No, I don't even know who you are." But she smiled, and it was the saddest, most haunting smile I'd ever seen. "Then why are you holding her?" she asked. I looked down and realized the doll was in my hands again. I dropped it immediately, stepping back, but the doll landed upright on its feet, its head tilted, strings of red thread tightening around its mouth. "Don't leave me again," it whispered in Clara's voice. My breath came in sharp gasps as the woman stepped closer, her bare feet silent against the floor. "He took everything from me," she said. "My child, my name, my rest." Her eyes darkened to black. "And now you carry my curse." I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the endless corridor, but every door I passed led to the same room, the guest room from the haunted house. I slammed one of the doors behind me, leaning against it, trying to catch my breath. The air smelled of dust and roses again. The diary sat open on the table beside the bed. Its pages were blank, except for one line scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Say her name." My throat went dry. I didn't want to, but my lips trembled, and before I realized it, I whispered, "Clara." The lights flickered violently. The doll's head turned toward me from across the room. The air pressure dropped so fast my ears popped, and in that instant, I knew I just invited her back. The windows shattered inward, and a freezing wind swept through the room. The curtains twisted like they were alive. I tried to run, but something invisible grabbed my wrist, cold, firm, inescapable. "Don't fight it," Clara's voice murmured in my ear. My vision blurred. I looked down and saw faint handprints forming on my skin, glowing like embers. "You brought me home," she said. "Now let me live." My body went limp, and a terrible calmness washed over me. I wasn't in control anymore. My eyes rolled back as the room filled with that haunting lullaby once more. When I came to, I was standing in front of a mirror, but the reflection wasn't mine. Clara's pale face stared back, her lips moving in sync with mine. "We're together now," she said through me. I tried to scream, but my mouth didn't obey. My hands lifted on their own, brushing my hair aside, tracing the outline of my face. "You have my eyes," she whispered. "You'll make them remember me." I felt tears streaming down my cheeks, though I wasn't crying. The mirror flickered, showing flashes of different faces. Ethan's, his uncle's, the doll's. And then it shattered, plunging me into darkness. I woke up on the roadside, my clothes torn, my skin covered in dirt. The motel was gone. No cars, no lights, just open fields under a pale dawn. My phone was dead, and the only thing beside me was a diary, its pages now filled with writing. But it wasn't mine. Each page told Clara's story, every memory I'd seen in my visions. And at the very end, one final entry appeared as I watched. "She sleeps now, in my house." My heart sank as I looked up, and in the distance, barely visible through the fog, stood Ethan's uncle's house. I don't remember walking back there. It was as if something pulled me, step by step. When I reached the porch, the door was already open. The smell of roses hit me like a wave. Inside, everything looked untouched, frozen in time. The clock on the wall still read 3:15 a.m. the moment everything began. The cradle sat in the middle of the room, the doll inside smiling softly. And then I heard it, my own voice coming from upstairs, whispering through the walls. "It's your turn now." I turned to run, but the door closed behind me on its own, sealing me inside forever. The sound of my own voice echoing through the house froze me in place. I looked toward the staircase, my flashlight flickering in my shaking hand. The air shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt, and I could see faint silhouettes moving along the banister, shadows of people that weren't there. "Ethan?" I called out, though I already knew the answer. The whispering stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Then, somewhere upstairs, a door creaked open slowly, followed by the faint thud of footsteps descending. Slow, dragging, deliberate. I backed toward the kitchen, searching for a weapon, anything. My hand brushed against a rusted knife, and I grabbed it instinctively. The air temperature dropped suddenly, my breath visible in the beam of my flashlight. "Why did you come back?" A voice whispered behind me. I spun around, knife raised, but no one was there. Instead, the cabinets began to open one by one, slamming shut again like something was searching through them. "You promised." The voice said again, closer now. "You promised to finish it." I stumbled backward, my heart pounding, and tripped over something soft. When I looked down, I screamed. It was Ethan. He was pale, his eyes open but lifeless, his lips slightly parted. For a moment, I thought he was dead. Then his fingers twitched. His gaze slowly shifted toward me, unfocused and glassy. "You shouldn't have said her name," he rasped. "Now she's awake." I shook him, desperate. "Ethan, what happened?" His head turned toward the cradle across the room. The doll inside was sitting upright again, staring at us both. "She's using you," he said weakly. "You'll finish what she couldn't." Before I could respond, his body went limp again. The house groaned like it was alive, and the doll began to hum. I backed away, clutching the knife tighter. "What do you want from me?" I shouted at the doll. The humming stopped. Then, in a child's voice, it answered, "A family." The cradle started rocking on its own, creaking louder and faster until it tipped over, spilling the doll onto the floor. It landed face down and the entire house fell silent. My chest tightened with dread. I took a step toward it, but then the walls began to bleed, dark streaks running down from the ceiling, dripping like ink. I turned and bolted for the door, but when I opened it, there was nothing outside, just an infinite hallway of doors, stretching forever. Every door looked the same, wooden, aged, and slightly ajar. I ran through one, and instantly, I was somewhere else. The motel room again. Then I turned, and it was the house. Then a hospital hallway. The world kept shifting with every breath I took, blending moments together like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Clara's voice echoed all around me. "You can't escape what you become." I looked down at my hands. They were covered in dirt and blood, though I hadn't touched anything. My reflection appeared on a shattered window nearby. It wasn't me anymore. My eyes were black, my smile faint but satisfied. I screamed, punching the glass, but my reflection didn't break. It laughed. "You think you're still you?" it asked. I fell to my knees, trembling. The walls began closing in again, warping like melting wax. Then the sound of a baby crying filled the air, soft at first, then louder. I followed it down the hallway, drawn against my will. The crying led me to a room I hadn't seen before, a nursery, untouched by decay, toys scattered neatly, moonlight spilling through the window. In the crib lay a baby, wrapped in white cloth. I hesitated before stepping closer. When I pulled the blanket back, the baby opened its eyes. They were mine. I stumbled back, horrified. The baby's mouth moved, whispering words it shouldn't have been able to say. "Finish your story." My head spun. The diary appeared on the crib, pages turning on their own until they stopped at a single sentence. The bloodline must be sealed. I didn't understand. Was Clara trying to be reborn through me? I turned to run, but the nursery door slammed shut. The baby began to laugh, a sound that grew deeper and distorted until it wasn't a baby at all. The room filled with shadows swirling like smoke. "You're the last," the voice said, "and the first." The air thickened until I could barely breathe. My flashlight flickered out, leaving me in total darkness. I felt something crawling across the floor. Small hands, dozens of them, grabbing at my ankles, pulling me down. I kicked and screamed, but they wouldn't let go. A light flared briefly, and in that flash, I saw them. Children, pale, eyeless, whispering my name. "She made us," they said in unison. "Now you will too." I swung the knife wildly, slashing at the dark, but the moment the blade hit one of them, everything went silent. When I looked again, I was alone, except for the doll, sitting on the crib, smiling. The silence was unbearable. My breathing echoed like thunder in my ears. I walked toward the crib slowly, the floor creaking beneath me. The doll's eyes followed every step I took. "You can end it," it said softly, "or begin again." My hand shook as I reached for it, but before I could touch it, the door burst open. A figure stood in the doorway. It looked like me, but her skin was gray, her eyes hollow. "You should have never stayed tonight," she said. Then she lunged forward, merging into me with a scream that wasn't entirely human. I woke up on the floor, gasping, drenched in sweat. Morning sunlight streamed through the window. The house looked normal again. No blood, no whispers, no doll. For a moment, I thought it was all a dream, until I looked at my hands. They were covered in tiny cuts shaped like fingerprints. My phone buzzed suddenly. It was a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for letting me sleep." Attached was a photo, me, standing by the crib, smiling with black eyes. My stomach dropped. I deleted the message, but another appeared instantly. "See you tonight." I couldn't move for a long time after that text. I just sat there on the dusty floor, watching the sunlight crawl across the room. My hand shook as I dialed 911, but every time the call connected, all I could hear was my own voice whispering, "You shouldn't have left." I threw the phone away, backing toward the front door. This time it opened. Outside, everything was quiet, the kind of silence that feels staged. The trees didn't sway, the birds didn't move, even the air felt hollow. I took one cautious step outside, half expecting the house to pull me back in. The road was empty. My car was still parked in the same spot, keys in the ignition. Relief washed over me as I started it. But when I looked in the rear-view mirror, the house was gone. Not distant, not fading, just gone, replaced by an endless stretch of road surrounded by fog. I drove for hours, or maybe minutes. Time didn't feel real anymore. Every few miles, the same house appeared again by the roadside, always with one window glowing faintly. Eventually, exhaustion won. I pulled over and stepped out to check if I was losing my mind. That's when I heard a baby crying from inside the trunk. I froze. My hands trembled as I approached the back of the car. The sound was unmistakable. Soft, rhythmic. The same cry from the house. I fumbled with the keys, finally prying the trunk open. Inside was a porcelain doll, its black eyes wide open, its mouth now unsewn. "Why won't you stay home?" it whispered. I slammed the trunk shut and stumbled backward, gasping for air. The road began to ripple beneath my feet, like water. The fog thickened, and the doll's voice echoed from all directions now. "You brought her out? She was never meant to leave." Panic took over. I ran down the road, screaming for help, but the landscape twisted around me. The fog shifted into trees. The asphalt turned to dirt, then stone, then floorboards. I was back inside the house again. The same creaking hallway, the same faint scent of roses. My knees gave out. "What do you want from me?" I cried. The house answered, not with words, but with movement. Doors opened one after another, leading me deeper inside. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floorboards. It felt like being inside a living heart. The diary lay open on the table, waiting. I picked it up reluctantly. The pages flipped on their own until they stopped at one covered in crimson stains. The ink formed a single sentence. "You're writing it now." I frowned, confused, until I noticed a pen in my hand. It wasn't mine. My wrist began to move on its own, scribbling words across the paper. Every line appeared as a memory I didn't recognize. Ethan's uncle, a ritual, the burial, the promise to keep her alive. My tears blurred the ink. No, I whispered, dropping the pen. But my hand kept moving, dragging the pen across the page until my name appeared beneath Clara's. That's when it hit me. Ethan's uncle hadn't been haunted. He was the one who'd started it. He'd tried to bind Clara's spirit to his family, to keep her from leaving this world. Each generation carried a piece of her, and now she'd found a new host, me. You chose to stay, her voice whispered from everywhere at once. I looked around, trembling. You needed someone who believed, she continued. Someone who would open the door again. My chest tightened as realization sank in. The diary wasn't just a record. It was a contract, and I had signed it. The room darkened until only the diary glowed faintly in my hands. Shadows pulled around my feet, forming faces that whispered in unison. We're part of her. The voices grew louder, overlapping until they became a single cry. I dropped the diary, backing away. The shadows reached for me, brushing my skin with cold fingers. Every touch felt like a memory leaving my body. My name, my face, my life. You don't need these anymore, Clara said softly. You'll be remembered as me. My knees buckled as the shadows crawled up my body, their voices merging with mine. I tried to fight, to scream, but my mouth no longer obeyed me. The walls pulsed faster now, like a heartbeat in panic. The mirror across the room flickered, showing me as Clara, her eyes, her hair, her pale smile. Please, I whispered weakly, just let me go. Her reflection tilted its head. You already are. The candle beside the bed flared, the flames stretching impossibly tall, and the entire room was consumed in blinding light. I felt weightless for a moment, floating in silence. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a hospital bed. Bright lights, white walls, the steady beeping of a heart monitor. Relief washed over me until I saw the nurse. She was humming the lullaby. You're awake, she said with a soft smile. We were worried about you, Clara. I froze. That's not my name, I whispered, but she only tilted her head and wrote something on her clipboard. It says here it is. I tried to sit up, but my body felt foreign, uncooperative. The nurse placed a hand on my arm. Don't strain yourself, she said gently. Your baby's safe now. I stared at her, my throat dry. My baby? She smiled wider and nodded toward the bassinet beside me. I turned slowly. There, wrapped in a white blanket, was a porcelain doll. Only this time, it blinked. Its tiny chest rose and fell, breathing softly. I screamed, but the sound came out as laughter. My hands trembled as I reached for my face and felt stitches along my mouth. The nurse leaned closer, whispering, Rest now, Clara. You have a family again. The lights dimmed. The lullaby started once more, and I realized the haunting hadn't followed me. I had become it. They kept me in the hospital for observation. Everyone spoke to me as if I were fragile glass. I smiled when they asked questions, answered politely. Inside, I was still screaming. At night, I could hear the lullaby echoing from the vents. When I asked about it, the nurse laughed and said, We haven't had a music system here in years. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt tiny fingers brush against my wrist, searching for the pulse. The doctor said trauma can do strange things to the mind. They gave me pills that made everything soft around the edges. I swallowed them anyway. The more I took, the clearer the whispers became. She's waiting, they told me. She needs the rest of you. I started writing in a notebook they gave me for therapy. Only I didn't recognize the handwriting. It was elegant, old-fashioned, looping across the page. Each morning, there were new sentences I hadn't written. One night a janitor came in to empty the trash. He froze when he saw me. You look just like her, he murmured, and before I could ask who, he hurried away. Later I found an old newspaper in the hallway, an article about a woman named Clara Whitley who died a century ago after losing her child in a fire. Her portrait stared up at me, smiling faintly. I touched the page and felt warmth spread to my fingertips. The headline blurred until it read, "Missing woman found alive." My name was beneath it. By morning, the staff would meet my eyes. I heard them whisper outside my door, words like delusion, possession, and transfer. When I pressed my ear to the glass, everything stopped. Then someone whispered from the other side, "Don't let them take her away again." I turned, and the doll sat in the visitor's chair, rocking gently on its own. Its eyes followed me. I blinked, and it was gone. They discharged me a week later, calling it full recovery. I went home, or what should have been home, but the apartment looked wrong. The furniture was where I'd left it, yet everything smelled of dust and roses. A baby's mobile hung over my bed. I didn't own one. The moment I touched it, the tune began to play the lullaby. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but the wallpaper showed a photo I'd never taken. Me, smiling in front of the haunted house, holding the doll. That night, I dreamed of the cellar again. Only this time I wasn't a visitor. I was watching from behind Clara's eyes. The ritual, the chanting, the moment her breath stopped. It all unfolded like a memory I'd lived. When I woke, there was dirt under my nails, a diary on my nightstand, its final page blank. The pen beside it was wet with ink. I decided to record everything, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But when I played back the first recording, all I heard was a woman's voice humming softly over mine. "Tell them my story," she whispered. The lights flickered and the temperature dropped. My breath came out in clouds. I turned off the recorder, but the humming continued for a full minute after the power died. Days blurred together. I stopped eating. The reflection in the mirror no longer matched my movements exactly. It lagged by a heartbeat, then smiled when I didn't. Sometimes I caught it, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Other times, it looked away, staring at something behind me. I tried covering the mirror, but every time I returned, the cloth was gone. A detective came by, asking about Ethan. His family hadn't seen him since the night at the house. I wanted to tell him everything, but when I opened my mouth, Clara's voice came out instead. "He's home." The detective paled, muttered something, and left quickly. Later that evening, a report appeared online. Abandoned house burns down mysteriously. One body recovered. They never said whose. I thought maybe it would end with a fire. But that night, as I sat alone, the air grew thick with the scent of roses again. The mobile above my bed began to spin, slowly at first, then faster. The diary opened itself on the dresser, pages fluttering until they stopped at a single line. One more story. I felt my hand move toward the pen. The whispers swelled, soft and pleading. Somewhere in the distance, a baby laughed. I picked up the pen and once again, I began to write. I woke to the sound of scratching inside the walls. It was faint, rhythmic, almost like someone writing from the other side. I called out, thinking maybe I'd imagined it, but the scratching stopped, then resumed, matching the pace of my heartbeat. I pressed my ear to plaster and heard her voice. "You're almost finished." My fingers began to ache. When I looked down, the pen was already in my hand, dripping ink onto the floorboards. Only it wasn't ink. It was dark, thicker, like blood. I tried to stop writing, but my hand wouldn't obey. The words came in perfect cursive, looping across the walls, the ceiling, the door. They told her story, how she lost her child, how her spirit was trapped within that cursed house. But as the sentences unfolded, I realized something horrifying. The names were changing. Ethan, me. Every letter burned into my skin like a brand. I screamed, but the sound never left my throat. The room absorbed it. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I sat in darkness, breathing too fast. From the corner of the room came the faint creak of the doll's head turning. I didn't remember bringing it home, yet it sat there, illuminated by nothing, its glass eyes reflecting something that wasn't me. "Thank you," it whispered. My breath froze. It wasn't Clara's voice anymore. It was a child's. I ran, out the door, down the street, barefoot in the cold. Every shadow looked like her silhouette. When I reached the police station, I burst inside, trembling and incoherent. The officer behind the desk frowned, then slowly stood. "Ma'am, you were reported missing 2 years ago." I stared at him, shaking my head. "No," I said, "it's only been a week." He slid a file toward me. Inside was a photo of me, pale and hollow-eyed, standing in front of the burnt ruins of Ethan's house. I tried to explain, but they didn't listen. They said I'd suffered a breakdown. They said I'd imagined everything. But when they led me to the mirror in the interrogation room, I understood why they were afraid. My reflection smiled before I did. Its eyes were brown, not green. And behind the glass, faintly, another face shimmered, Clara's. She was still there, watching. They kept me under observation again. The walls of my hospital room were white this time. No vents, no mirrors. But I could still hear them at night. The lullaby, the scratching, the whispers. They said I was safe now, that no one could reach me here. Yet when I woke one morning, the notebook was back on my pillow. Fresh ink covered its pages. My handwriting, or hers. I tore out the pages, one by one, and threw them into the air. They didn't fall. They hovered for a moment, spinning slowly, before arranging themselves on the floor in the shape of a door. The same cellar door from Ethan's basement. My heart hammered. I knew what it meant. I knew she wanted me to open it again. The nurses found me unconscious on the floor. They said I'd been whispering to the wall for hours. When they checked the footage, every camera went static at the exact same time. In the corner of one frame, though, just for a second, was a woman in a black dress holding a child. No one else saw it but me. It's been months now. They released me, said I was stable. I moved to a new city, changed my number, tried to start over. Sometimes I almost believe it's behind me. But then at night, the mobile starts to spin again. Slowly, silently, and from the shadows, a voice whispers my name. Not Clara's, not the child's. My own. I don't tell people what happened anymore. They wouldn't believe me. But every story needs an ending, doesn't it? The notebook sits beside me now, open to a blank page, the pen resting perfectly in place. I can feel her waiting, patient as ever. Maybe if I write just one more line, she'll finally leave me alone. The house, the doll, the whispers all began there. And maybe, when I finish this last sentence, it'll all end here. Or maybe it'll start again. People still ask me if what I said was real. And honestly, I stopped trying to convince them. Some things you have to see or survive to believe. Sometimes I wonder if it's really over. Or if it's just waiting for the right night to happen again. If you made it this far, remember, stories like this don't just happen to anyone. They happen to the ones who listen. So if you're still here, subscribe. Because next time, what happened to me might happen to you.